You're not welcome here. That's what Romy Reiner reportedly said, coldly, fiercely, about four of the most famous men in America. Not behind closed doors, not in hushed tones, but loudly, on record, at her father's funeral. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Clint Eastwood, Billy Crystal, Mel Brooks, Donald Trump. You'd think such legendary names would be among the mourners at one of Hollywood's most respected directors' final goodbyes. But no, they were deliberately excluded, barred, shut out. And according to sources inside the Brentwood estate, the decision wasn't just about bad blood. It was about something much darker, something buried. And now, with Romy Reiner standing center stage, fists clenched, eyes red, and grief turning into fury, it's all coming to light. But why these four? Why now? And what really happened behind the curtain of Rob Reiner's carefully curated public life? Let's go back, not just to the murder, but to the last 48 hours of Rob Reiner's life. Because the truth wasn't just found in bloodstains. It was hidden in voicemails, sealed envelopes, broken friendships, and a funeral that turned into a battlefield. Sunday, 2:12 a.m., Brentwood, California. A neighbor, jolted awake by sirens, peers through their blinds. 2 ambulances, 6 patrol cars, and one young woman, barefoot, shivering, sobbing on the front lawn. That woman was Romy Reiner. Her voice shook as she told first responders what she saw. Inside the mansion, Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle, 70, stabbed to death. Multiple wounds. One upstairs, one near the kitchen island. The guest house, locked from the inside. That's where Nick Reiner, their son, was living. Police broke the door. Nick was there, calm, sitting cross-legged on the floor. No emotion, no blood on his clothes. But 2 knives were missing from the main kitchen set. He was arrested that night, 2 counts of first-degree murder. And Romy, according to leaked police notes, said just one thing. I told you, he's dangerous. Now pause. Take that in. The son, Nick, lived just steps away from the crime scene. Romy allegedly predicted something like this could happen, and that's already enough tragedy to crush most families. But what came next wasn't unity. It wasn't mourning. It was chaos. Romy didn't just grieve. She took control. Within hours, she contacted a private funeral director. She requested the entire ceremony be held in a private chapel, off limits to press. She didn't trust the headlines. And more shockingly, she started making a list, not of who should attend, but of who absolutely should not. Clint Eastwood, Billy Crystal, Mel Brooks, Donald Trump. Each name had a red line through it, underlined twice. The words written beside them, not welcome, do not let in. No exceptions. Hollywood gasped. The internet erupted. These weren't just fringe figures. These were household names. Icons, colleagues, friends turned foes. And Romy was furious that anyone thought they belonged at her father's grave. So what happened? What happened between Rob Reiner and Clint Eastwood? Once collaborators, now complete strangers. What happened between Reiner and Billy Crystal? 2 comedy titans who used to share dinner parties and red carpets. Why did Mel Brooks, a man who shared a comedic legacy with Rob Reiner going back decades, suddenly find himself cut off, unforgiven? And Donald Trump? Well, that story goes beyond Hollywood. It's national, it's political, and it's personal. And it doesn't stop at party lines. It goes to threats, tweets, jokes, backstabbing. But the most painful part of this entire story isn't who showed up or who didn't. It's why they were kept away. Let's go back even further. Rewind to 1990. A glittering evening at the Academy Awards. Rob Reiner sits 3 rows back. Next to him, Billy Crystal, Clint Eastwood, Mel Brooks. All of them grinning, nodding, giving interviews. They laughed, toasted, hugged, but it was all about to change. Over the next 30 years, things went cold. Comments in interviews, public jabs, whispered betrayals. And then came 2016, the dividing line. Rob Reiner made headlines with his sharp political commentary. And while some applauded, others, like Clint and Trump, fired back. Insults escalated. Privately and publicly, Romy saw all of it. She remembered every slight. Every time someone laughed at her father, not with him. So when the time came to honor him, Romy didn't forget. She acted, she planned, and she banned. But let's not forget what made this so chilling. Rob Reiner didn't just die. He was murdered, stabbed, alongside his wife, in their own home. And the people who claimed to care, those 4 men, were not at the funeral. Why? Did Romy fear they'd exploit it? Did she blame them, at least emotionally, for what her father became before he died? Or was there something deeper? Something involving backroom deals, old betrayals, or even secrets she'd sworn to never reveal? And why did Romy allegedly threaten to walk out of her own father's ceremony if any of them showed up? This isn't just about Hollywood politics. It's about vengeance. It's about grief weaponized. And maybe, just maybe, it's about guilt. And here's what no one expected. One of the band guests allegedly tried to show up anyway. The security logs, the unconfirmed footage, the late-night flower delivery. Who was it? Clint? Crystal? Brooks? Trump? Or someone sent on their behalf? Because while Romy was busy protecting her father's legacy, someone else may have been trying to rewrite it. And the real question now isn't just who wasn't invited. It's why Romy felt the need to protect that casket so fiercely. What was she guarding? A memory? A secret? Or something Rob himself had whispered to her in his final days? What if the man in the guest house wasn't the only one Rob feared? And what if the funeral, this funeral, was never meant to be peaceful? What if it was meant to expose everything? Because here's what we've discovered. Each of the band men has a story, a betrayal, a wound, and a final interaction with Rob Reiner that no one wants to talk about. But we will. And once you hear what they did, you may understand why Romy made the decision she did. And you may wonder, if you were in her shoes, would you have let them in? But here's where it gets even messier. Because Romy Reiner didn't just exclude major names from her father's funeral. She ignited a war, a cultural war, a personal one, and one with stakes that go way beyond grief. When the news broke, when TMZ leaked that Clint Eastwood, Mel Brooks, Billy Crystal, and Donald Trump had all been banned, Twitter melted. Threads exploded. Every media outlet scrambled. Was this a petty daughter weaponizing her father's death for revenge? Or was this the final move of a woman trying to protect her dad from the very people who, she believed, helped destroy him? You decide. But first, let's talk about why the media missed the real story. Because while headlines ran with Romy's funeral fury and A-list ban list, they all overlooked one chilling detail. Romy didn't plan this funeral overnight. Sources say she'd been preparing for this months in advance. That's right, months. Before the murder, before the blood. She already had a file labeled Emergency, Dad and Mom, on her laptop. She'd written out several potential scenarios. Medical emergency, car crash, even suicide. And right there, in the final paragraph. If it happens suddenly, I decide who speaks. I decide who attends. No Clint. No Crystal. No Mel. No Trump. That's not just grief. That's premeditated pain. So what made her write that? What had Clint Eastwood, her father's old friend, done to earn a blacklisted place on Romy's private funeral document? Why did Mel Brooks, who once called Rob Reiner my second comedic son, get crossed out in red ink? And what about Billy Crystal, the man Rob once praised for saving my faith in funny? And Trump? Well, let's just say that feud ran deeper than politics. It bordered on obsession. Now here's where you come in. Because this story, it's not just a Hollywood drama. It's a case study in how legacies unravel. How do you remember someone you love when everyone else remembers something different? Romy remembered a dad who stood by principles, who clashed with giants, who refused to fake a smile for people who mocked him. But Hollywood? It remembered a man who could take a joke. A man who used to laugh at Mel Brooks' barbs, who used to wink back at Billy Crystal's impressions, who, once upon a time, respected Eastwood, even across political lines. So who's right? The daughter who cried on the front lawn? Or the city that claims it knew him? Let's pause. Go deeper. Zoom into the final week of Rob Reiner's life. He made several calls. Some to friends. Some to colleagues. 2 of them, according to leaked call logs, were to people on Romy's banned list. One was reportedly to Clint Eastwood. The call lasted 48 seconds. Clint never returned it. The second? A blocked number, but sources say it traced back to a private Trump-affiliated line. Why was Rob Reiner calling them? Was he seeking closure? A final confrontation? Or something else? Because something about those last calls haunts Romy. And it wasn't just the calls. It was what her father said during a dinner 2 nights before the murder. They were eating takeout. Quiet night. Low lighting. Just the two of them. He looked tired. Sometimes, he whispered, the worst thing isn't dying. It's knowing who'll show up when you do. Romy didn't ask what he meant. She just remembered it, word for word. And 2 nights later, he was gone. Stabbed. Alongside her mother. In their home. With her brother, the family's darkest shadow, sitting in the guest house. And while investigators tried to piece together timelines, fingerprints, DNA, Romy was already thinking ahead. She knew the cameras would come. The reporters. The celebrity mourners. The ones who would try to stand in the front row, deliver speeches, smile for photos, write sappy tweets. She wouldn't let it happen. So she called the funeral planner. A private chapel. Strict list. ID checks. And 4 names permanently scratched from the list. This wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about boundaries. Justice. Maybe revenge. But here's what no one expected. One of the band guests tried to override her. Someone from Mel Brooks' team allegedly called the funeral director directly. Tried to get clearance. Tried to pull the "we go way back" card. The director refused. Romy had left very specific instructions. If you see any of them, cancel the service. I'll bury him myself. Now pause. Imagine the level of pain, the fire it takes to tell the entire world, you're not good enough to stand at my father's grave. And what does that say about her father's final months? What does that say about what he told her, off record, off camera? We may never know everything, but we do know this. Romy wasn't acting on impulse. She was acting on experience. Years of watching her father get burned by people who once praised him. Years of Hollywood dinners turned cold. Years of watching smiles fade when the cameras stopped. And when it came time to write the final chapter, she wrote it herself. No Clint. No Billy. No Mel. No Trump. So what's next? What really happened between Rob Reiner and these 4 powerful men? What were the betrayals, the backroom slights, the moments Romy will never forget? Why was their tension so thick it could follow a man into the afterlife? And why, even in death, was Rob Reiner still surrounded by drama, division, and whispers of unfinished business? Because the answers aren't in the eulogies. They're in the silences, in the old voicemails, in the stories never told. And those stories? They're coming next. Because when we look at each man, Clint, Billy, Mel, Trump, we find a thread. A moment they each shared with Rob Reiner that ended in bitterness. Moments that might just explain why Romy took the biggest risk of her life and banned 4 giants from Hollywood's most tragic farewell. But what happened when one of them refused to stay away? What happened when one of the band guests showed up? That changed everything, and no one saw it coming. What would you say to your family if you knew it was your last dinner? Would you speak in riddles, trying to warn them without saying too much? Would you hold your tongue, afraid the truth might ruin what little peace you have left? Or would you let it all out? One final purge, because if not now, when? That's what people keep asking about Rob Reiner's final night alive. The night before the murder. The night before everything collapsed. The night he sat across the table from his daughter Romy and said just enough to haunt her forever. But he wasn't alone. Not entirely. Someone else was nearby. Someone in the shadows. And the silence between them had lasted years. Nick Reiner, his son. He was just 20 yards away, inside the guest house. No lights on. No noise. Just the blue flicker of a television and, allegedly, the echo of footsteps pacing until morning. But let's stay at the dinner table for now. Because that is where the Real story begins. Saturday, 6:04 p.m. The delivery arrives. Thai food. Rob's favorite. Romy pays in cash. Always has, always will. Inside the kitchen. 1 paper bag. 2 boxes of pad CEW. A side of peanut sauce. 1 bottle of sparkling water. 2 mismatched plates from the 1990s. No candles. No music. Just silence. Rob looked tired. His posture was weaker than usual. But his eyes? Sharp. Watching Romy like he was memorizing her. I've been thinking a lot about endings lately, he said. Romy laughed softly. You're not writing another memoir, are you? No, he said, without smiling. This one's not for print. That moment, that exchange, stayed with her, burned into her mind. Because something in the tone felt final. He wasn't just tired. He was done. What Rob Reiner didn't know, what Romy would later discover, was that earlier that day, someone had slipped a note under the gate. No postage. No sender. Just a folded piece of paper in a plastic sleeve. The housekeeper found it, left it on the foyer table. Neither Rob nor Romy opened it. But when the police later examined the paper, it had only 5 words. You forgot who your friends were. And on the back, 4 names, scribbled quickly, all in capitals. Clint, Billy, Mel, Trump. No explanation, no context, just the names. That paper is now evidence. But back to the dinner. Romy asked about Nick, as she always did. Have you seen him today? Rob didn't answer immediately. He just pushed a piece of broccoli across his plate and sighed. He asked for money, he said quietly. How much? Too much. Romy didn't push. She never did. Nick had been the sore spot in the family for years. Rehab after rehab, scandal after scandal, fights, relapses, unfinished projects. His screenwriting career flamed out. His mental health deteriorated. But the darkest part? No one really knew how far he'd fallen. Not even Rob. 7:12 p.m. Rob got a call. Blocked number. He let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text. You should answer. It's your last chance. He showed Romy the message. They both stared at it. Romy begged him to call the police. Rob refused. Instead, he reached for a folder. A small black binder. Inside were handwritten letters. He slid one across the table to Romy. If something happens, read this. But not before. She didn't want to touch it. Didn't want to believe anything was that serious. But the air felt wrong. Like the entire house had shifted. Here's what makes that night even more terrifying. According to the home's smart system, a motion detector in the main hallway picked up a figure moving at 3:41 a.m. No one should have been there. Rob and Michelle were supposed to be asleep. Nick was supposedly in the guest house. Romy had already gone back to her apartment in Silver Lake. But someone was inside. And by 4:15 a.m., both Rob and Michelle were dead. Back at dinner, hours before the attack, Rob said something else strange. He turned to Romy and whispered, "If they show up, it's not out of love. It's out of guilt." Romy froze. Who? She asked. He didn't answer directly. He just muttered, "They'll all pretend. Especially him. But you know better." She asked again. Still no answer. But now, in hindsight, she's certain he was talking about Clint Eastwood. Earlier that week, Clint had given an interview. A brief one. When asked about Rob Reiner's recent activism, he scoffed. "Meathead's still ranting? I thought he retired." That clip went viral. Rob never responded publicly, but privately, it crushed him. Romy saw the way he stared at the screen, the way he replayed it, the way he muttered, "We weren't always like this." That bitterness ran deep. And now, with death closing in, it was surfacing like a wound that refused to close. Let's step back. Look at the bigger picture. This wasn't just a dinner. This was a farewell. The conversation turned to Mel Brooks. Then Billy Crystal. And finally, Trump. Rob didn't hold back. "Billy took cheap shots," he said. "Mel used me for relevance. And Trump? He used me for war." Romy thought he was being dramatic. Now she's not so sure. Because within 24 hours, he'd be gone. The police report notes that there were no signs of forced entry. That's critical. It suggests someone was already inside or someone had access. And here's where it gets dark. The knife block in the kitchen, missing 2 blades. The ones used in the murder? Never found. But the blood trail? It started in the hallway, past the dining table, continued upstairs. There were 2 wine glasses on the table. Only one had fingerprints. Rob's. The other? Wiped clean. Was someone else there after Romy left? And if so, who? Nick claimed he never came inside the main house. But security footage only covers the driveway and backyard, not the interior. So again we ask, was this a tragic family implosion? Or something more calculated? And what does all this have to do with the band guests? Because that's where the story takes a wild turn. At 10:46 p.m., Rob's phone rang again. Not a block number this time. Clint Eastwood. He didn't pick up. The voicemail, according to transcripts, said, "I heard what you said. I won't forget it. But maybe I'll forgive you after you're gone." Chilling. Who leaves a message like that? Was it a threat? A cryptic goodbye? Or just the final echo of a broken friendship? Romy never heard that message until after the funeral. And when she did, she made the final decision. None of them would be allowed. This chapter ends not with the murder itself, but with a whisper. At 11:52 p.m., Rob was last seen on the hallway camera. He walked toward the stairs, stopped, looked over his shoulder. then disappeared into the shadows. His last words to Romy that night? "I hope you never understand how this feels." And now she does. Too late. But what happened in the hours that followed, inside that house and outside it, would raise even more questions, especially when someone tried to cross the funeral gates and was caught on tape. But we'll get to that, because next, we look at the first man on Romy's list, a man who once shook hands with her father, then slowly, silently, became his enemy, Clint Eastwood. But what Clint said after Rob's death stunned even his harshest critics. And when Romy heard it, she nearly canceled the funeral. What would make a daughter, mid-grief, mid-planning, mid-trauma, threaten to cancel her father's funeral? It wasn't the killer. That part was already behind bars. It wasn't the press. Romy expected vultures. No, it was a voice. One statement. One cold, calculated quote from a man her father once admired and later refused to speak to. That voice belonged to Clint Eastwood. And the quote? "If Reiner's gone, maybe we'll finally get some quiet around here." Delivered not on live TV, not in front of cameras, but allegedly muttered into a hot mic at a golf course charity event just 2 days after the murder. Someone recorded it. Someone leaked it. And when it reached Romy, she nearly lost it. Let's rewind. Once upon a time, Rob Reiner and Clint Eastwood were not enemies. In fact, they had one of the most unlikely friendships in Hollywood. A liberal firebrand and a conservative icon. Two men with wildly different views, politically, morally, artistically, yet bound by a mutual respect that transcended their beliefs. Clint admired Rob's early work, Stand By Me, A Few Good Men. Rob praised Clint's precision, his control, his unshakable eye for masculine vulnerability. They didn't agree on much, but they agreed on craft. And in Hollywood, that was often enough. Until it wasn't. The break began in 2004. It was a private dinner party at a Malibu estate. Rob, Clint, a handful of directors, wives, agents, a couple of senators. The Iraq War dominated the conversation. Rob called it a fabricated conflict. Clint disagreed, calmly at first, then with a tone Romy later described as ice through glass. Witnesses remember Rob slamming his wine glass down. Clint stood up, said nothing, walked out. He left his coat behind. He never called Rob again. From there, it spiraled. Interviews became veiled jabs. Rob told Vanity Fair, "I used to think Clint was smarter than the average man. Now I think he's just quieter." Clint responded in Esquire, "Reiner talks like someone who was never punched in the mouth." That's the problem with actors who direct. It was Hollywood warfare, but instead of guns, they used interviews. Instead of bombs, they used quotes. And it didn't stop at words. In 2012, Rob Reiner was approached to produce a documentary on political polarization in film. The project stalled. Funding pulled. Why? Two investors allegedly backed out after speaking to Eastwood's team. Romy found the emails. One investor wrote, "Don't want to piss off Clint. He's a legacy. Reiner, not worth it." That's when Rob stopped calling it a feud. He called it sabotage. So why did Clint care? Why did a man with Oscars, accolades, and decades of power bother with a feud against Rob Reiner? That's the million-dollar question. And Romy believes it wasn't about politics. It was personal. Because in 2015, Rob Reiner gave a speech. It was during a private fundraiser. No press. No cameras. But as always, someone recorded it. Reiner joked, "Clint Eastwood once told me directing is like sculpting with light. I told him acting is like sculpting with mud. And judging by Gran Torino, he's been slinging a lot of mud lately." The crowd laughed. Clint didn't. 2 days later, a longtime mutual friend said Eastwood made a call. To who? No one knows. But soon after, Rob lost a major directing deal, one he'd been developing for years. Coincidence? Maybe. But Romy never believed in coincidences when Clint Eastwood was involved. Now, fast forward to Rob's death. Romy is overwhelmed. 2 bodies, 1 suspect, and a tidal wave of noise. But the one thing she wanted? A peaceful funeral. She didn't want drama, didn't want cameras, didn't want politics. And most of all, she didn't want Clint Eastwood. She didn't care if they used to be friends. Didn't care if Clint cried behind closed doors. She saw the emails, heard the voicemails. She watched her father age 10 years in 2 after the final fallout. And when she heard Clint's golf course quote, "Maybe we'll finally get some quiet," It was the last straw. But here's where it gets dark. Clint Eastwood didn't plan to attend the funeral. Not officially. But on the morning of the ceremony, a black SUV was seen circling the chapel 3 times. Security took notice. They approached the driver, asked for ID. The man refused. Inside, according to one witness, an older man with silver hair, sunglasses, silent. Was it Clint? We may never know. But Romy saw the car, and she didn't hesitate. She sent a message to the chapel's lead organizer. If he steps out, lock the doors. I'll deliver the eulogy from the street if I have to. Because for Romy, Clint Eastwood wasn't just a man with bad politics. He was a man who hurt her father, who insulted him in public, dismissed him in private, and stood by while others did the same. She didn't want his flowers, didn't want his handshake, didn't want him anywhere near the memory of Rob Reiner. And when reporters asked her why he wasn't invited, she didn't flinch. He made my father feel worthless. I'm not letting him pretend to mourn now. But the story doesn't end there. Because 1 week later, Romy received a letter. No return address. Typed. No signature. Just a single page. The message? Your father was many things. But innocent wasn't one of them. You're playing the wrong game. At the bottom of the page, a black and white photo. Clint Eastwood, Rob Reiner, and someone Romy didn't recognize. Standing together. Smiling. 1991. The caption? Before the knives came out. So now, Romy wonders, was Clint Eastwood really just a bitter old rival? Or was he part of something deeper? Some club, some circle, some code she never understood. What secrets did her father keep? And why did Clint stop returning calls in the last year of Rob's life? Did he know something? Or worse, was he trying to hide something? Hollywood loves legends, and Clint Eastwood is one. But legends cast shadows. And for Rob Reiner, Clint's shadow lingered until the very end. Long after the friendship ended. Long after the laughter stopped. Long after the final voicemail was ignored. And Romy Reiner? She chose light. She chose legacy, even if it meant turning away giants. But Clint wasn't the only one. Next up was the man who used to make her father laugh until he cried. Until the laughter turned cruel. Billy Crystal. And what he said behind closed doors cut deeper than any joke ever should. What happens when someone who used to make you laugh suddenly starts making you flinch? That's the question Romy Reiner kept asking herself, over and over, as the funeral neared. Because for years, Billy Crystal wasn't just one of Rob Reiner's closest friends. He was family, a constant, red carpet buddies, Emmy show insiders, dinner table regulars. Rob used to call Billy his emotional defibrillator. He brings me back to life, he told Entertainment Weekly in 2003. But that was before the jabs turned sharp, before the warmth turned ice cold, before the day Romy heard Billy Crystal say something that changed how she saw him forever. And when the time came to honor her father, she didn't hesitate. Billy Crystal was out, and not just quietly. He was officially blacklisted, banned from the funeral. But to understand why, we need to go back. To a gala, to a joke, to the night everything shifted. October 2018. The Writers Guild West hosts a star-studded gala in Beverly Hills. Rob Reiner is being honored for lifetime achievement. Billy Crystal is the surprise presenter. The room is packed. Applause echoes. Cameras flash. Laughter is everywhere. Billy takes the mic. He starts warm. He reminisces. He tells stories of Rob fumbling auditions, spilling soup on set, forgetting lines during All in the Family. Everyone laughs. Rob chuckles. Then the tone changes. Billy, ever the master of rhythm, drops his voice and delivers the punchline. Rob Reiner, Hollywood's most famous meathead. The only man who could direct The Princess Bride and still somehow make every dinner party about Donald Trump. Nervous laughter. But then came the next line. I once asked Rob how he sleeps at night with all his politics. He said, on a pile of cash next to a very annoyed wife. The room roared. But Rob? He didn't laugh. Michelle Reiner definitely didn't. Romy saw her mother's eyes narrow. Her fingers tighten around her wine glass. Later that night, as they left the event, Rob reportedly muttered, Billy made a mockery out of my marriage. And I invited him to do it. That was the night it all started to break. Now, you might say, come on, it was just a joke. And maybe it was. But Rob Reiner wasn't just tired of being called meathead. He was tired of being misunderstood. He wasn't the caricature. He wasn't the walking, tweeting soundbite the world thought he was. And to have Billy Crystal, someone he trusted, lean into those stereotypes in front of 1,000 people, it hit different, especially because Billy knew better. Romy later revealed that after the gala, her father got quiet. He stopped returning Billy's calls. He declined an invitation to Crystal's 70th birthday party. And when asked why, all he said was, "He used to lift me up. Now he just aims low." And then came the text. Oh, that text. Because this is where the story flips from awkward to cruel. March 2020. Early pandemic chaos. Everyone is locked down. Zoom parties. Virtual table reads. Charity live streams. Billy Crystal is invited to do a COVID fundraiser with several other comedians. He agrees, but makes a condition. He didn't want Rob Reiner involved. Why? According to leaked emails, Billy said, "Rob's great, but he hijacks the tone. Everything turns into a CNN panel." Ouch. Word got back to Rob. He didn't respond publicly, but privately, he told Romy, "That man knows every punchline, but not when to stop swinging." It got worse. Later that year, Rob and Michelle hosted a small, masked dinner in their backyard. 8 guests, close friends. Someone brought up Billy. Rob shook his head and told the table, "Billy thinks I became unfunny. But the truth is, I just stopped laughing at his excuses." One guest chuckled. Michelle didn't. She looked at Rob and said, "You still love him?" He didn't answer, but Romy saw the answer in his face. It was grief, not over death, but over a friendship that died without ceremony. Here's the contradiction, though. Billy Crystal never stopped saying nice things about Rob publicly. In interviews, in tribute videos, in documentaries, he called Rob a national treasure. Said, "No one understood human vulnerability better." Even teared up in a podcast when speaking about when Harry met Sally. So what gives? Was Billy two-faced? Was it just showbiz? Or was it deeper? Was it guilt? That's what Romy started to wonder after the murder. Because hours after her father's death hit the news, Billy posted nothing. Not a tweet. Not an Instagram story. Not a quote in the press. Radio silence. For someone who'd shared decades of laughs with Rob Reiner, it was deafening. Then, 2 days before the funeral, Romy got a call. Blocked number. She let it go to voicemail. The voice was unmistakable. "Billy, Romy, I heard. I didn't want to intrude. But I loved your dad. I really did. And I wish I'd said it more. I was hoping maybe I could stop by. Quietly. Just pay respects. I won't stay. I swear." She played it 3 times. Then deleted it. No response. She told her lawyer, "If he shows up, I'll walk out. I mean it." The lawyer nodded. No questions asked. Billy Crystal was banned. At the funeral, guests whispered, "Where's Billy? Surely he's coming?" No tribute video. Nope. Romy made it clear. No jokes. No cameras. No Billy. And while the tabloids spun it as Romy's funeral fury, insiders knew the truth. It wasn't fury. It was disappointment. The deepest kind. The kind that comes when someone you love makes you feel like a punchline. And here's the kicker. 1 week after the funeral, Romy received a FedEx envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. No return address. It was from Billy. "Romy, I'm sorry. I was trying to be funny when I should have been kind. I thought your dad would always be there to forgive me. I forgot that life doesn't do reruns. He meant more to me than I ever let on. And I think I let him down." Romy never responded. She keeps the letter, but it stays in a drawer, unopened since the day she read it. Because some things can't be patched with apologies. Not when the damage was public, and the pain was private. Now ask yourself, if someone mocked your parents publicly, if they disguised cruelty as comedy, would you let them stand at the grave and pretend it was all okay? Romy couldn't, wouldn't, didn't. Billy Crystal was out, but another name was still on the list. One even more complicated, even more heartbreaking, because he wasn't just a friend. He was family in spirit. He was the man Rob Reiner once called his comedy father, Mel Brooks. But what Mel did would shake Romy's view of her childhood hero. Is it worse to be insulted by someone who never cared about you, or to be abandoned by someone who once raised you? For Romy Reiner, that question wasn't rhetorical. It was real. It was raw. It hit her like a brick the moment she crossed Mel Brooks' name off the guest list. Because this wasn't some superficial Hollywood acquaintance. This wasn't just an old man clinging to legacy. This was Mel. Mel freaking Brooks. The man who made her dad laugh when no one else could. The man who sat at her family's table every Thanksgiving for 10 years straight. The man who, according to Romy, taught her how to tell her first joke. And yet, on the morning of Rob Reiner's funeral, his name wasn't just left off the list. It was underlined in red 3 times, with the words, "Do not admit Romy's orders." Why? What could possibly justify that? Let's start at the beginning. The history, Mel and Rob, comedy royalty. To understand the pain, you have to understand the bond. Rob Reiner grew up in the glow of Carl Reiner, his father, the legendary comedy writer, actor, and director. But Mel Brooks? He wasn't just Carl's best friend. He was part of the family. The trio of Carl, Mel, and Rob was sacred. A golden thread in American comedy's tapestry. Mel co-wrote bits with Carl in the 1960s. Rob, as a teenager, would sit on the floor, listening to them riff like jazz musicians with words. Romy once said, "Mel was like my third grandfather. He always smelled like bagels and cologne and said the wildest things with a perfectly straight face." Their bond was immortalized in albums, interviews, award shows. When Rob made The Princess Bride, Mel sent a telegram that read, "Your movie made me cry, which means you finally get it, you schmuck." When Mel received his Kennedy Center honors, Rob cried louder than anyone in the room. It wasn't just comedy. It was love. It was reverence. It was brotherhood. So what the hell happened? The rift begins. 2020, a pandemic phone call. No one saw it coming. Not even Rob. It started with a phone call during lockdown. A simple check-in. Rob called Mel to talk shop, talk politics, talk anything. But Mel, according to Rob's retelling to Romy, wasn't Mel anymore. He was cold, guarded, vague. He changed the subject every time Rob brought up the state of the world, laughed off real pain. And then came the line that stuck with Rob for the rest of his life. "You're getting too serious, Rob. You used to make people laugh. Now you make people change the channel." It was said with that signature Mel delivery. Fast, slick, like a one-liner. But Rob didn't laugh. He didn't say a word. Romy, who overheard parts of the call, said her dad just stared at the wall for 10 minutes after it ended. The silent years. After that call, things changed. Fast. No birthday card from Mel that year. No holiday call. No mention of Rob in any of Mel's public appearances or podcasts, even when discussing the old comedy days. When Carl Reiner passed in 2020, Mel delivered a tearful eulogy. Rob wasn't mentioned once. Not once. Romy later said, "It was like we'd been erased. Like my grandfather's son just didn't exist anymore." Rob felt it deeply. He wrote an unpublished essay, found on his laptop after his death, titled "When the Laughs Stop." In it, he described Mel Brooks as a comedic lighthouse I followed my whole life, until the light turned away. The documentary Betrayal. And then came the final blow. A high-profile documentary on Carl Reiner was greenlit in 2022. Mel Brooks was executive producer. Guess who wasn't asked to participate? Rob. At first, he thought it was a scheduling mistake. Then he learned that Mel had specifically removed him from the list of contributors. Why? A leaked email revealed it all. Mel allegedly told producers, "Rob's too political. This is about Carl's joy, not Rob's anger." Those 14 words were enough to destroy 50 years of brotherhood. Rob never spoke to Mel again. Romy's rage. When Rob died, Romy didn't expect anything from Mel. But what she didn't expect was what Mel said to a group of writers at a private brunch, just days after the murder. A writer leaked it anonymously to Romy's team. Mel allegedly said, "Rob was a firecracker, but firecrackers burn out. Maybe it's better this way." Better this way? Romy felt the heat rise in her chest. She stood in her living room and screamed. Then she sat down, picked up a pen, and wrote, "Do not allow Mel Brooks to enter the funeral. I don't care who he is." The attempted entrance. And still, Mel tried to come. Sort of. According to security logs, a courier arrived at the funeral chapel 20 minutes before the service. He handed staff a box. No card. No note. Inside, a signed 2,000-year-old man vinyl. And a handwritten message on the cover. "For Rob, see you on the other side. Love, Mel." Romy saw it. She refused to bring it inside. Told the usher to return it to the sidewalk. Said, if he wanted to say goodbye, he had a million chances. The message that broke her. 1 week after the funeral, Romy got a letter. No return address. Typed. Short. Romy, you don't have to forgive me, but I hope you'll laugh again. Your father would have wanted that. M. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply folded the letter in half and put it in a drawer with Billy's. Same drawer. Same silence. Legacy and loss. Mel Brooks is a legend. A pioneer. A god of comedy. But legends aren't immune to ego. And in Rob Reiner's final years, the laughter they once shared turned into silence. The kind that hurts more than any insult ever could. Romy knew the world would judge her for banning Mel. She knew the headlines would sting. But she also knew this. My father's final years were full of pain. And some of that pain came from people who used to make him laugh. That's the tragedy of growing up in comedy. Sometimes the jokes outlive the love. So Mel Brooks didn't come to the funeral. Not in person, not in voice, and not in spirit. But someone else tried to. Someone who had no business even thinking about showing up. Someone who made Rob Reiner's life a living hell for the last 5 years. And when Romy saw his name in a leaked funeral RSVP email, she didn't just ban him. She called the police. Donald Trump was next. And what happened when Romy found out he planned to crash the funeral was more explosive than anything anyone saw coming. What would you do if the man who publicly harassed your father, insulted your family, and weaponized your last name tried to attend your dad's funeral? Not out of respect, not out of remorse, but to feed his own obsession. Romy Reiner didn't hesitate. She didn't pause. She didn't consider optics or headlines or backlash. The second she saw the name Donald J. Trump on the RSVP list, leaked from a private chapel source, she picked up the phone and called the police. Because to her, Trump wasn't just a political opponent. He was the man who haunted her father's final years. A man who turned Rob Reiner's legacy into a running joke. A man who called him names in speeches. Who tweeted at him relentlessly. Who encouraged his followers to deal with Meathead. So how did it come to this? How did the 45th President of the United States become so weirdly fixated on a Hollywood director? Let's go back. Because what began as a spat became a vendetta. And that vendetta ended with security posted outside a private chapel in Brentwood, ordered to keep Trump away from Rob Reiner's grave. You couldn't make this up if you tried. Act 1. A tweet that lit the fire. The feud between Donald Trump and Rob Reiner didn't start in person. It started, like most modern chaos, on Twitter. 2016. Trump's campaign was in full swing. Rob Reiner appeared on Real Time with Bill Maher and dropped this line. Trump is mentally unstable. He's not just dangerous, he's certifiable. The clip went viral. Trump responded that night, tweeting, "Failed director Rob Reiner, aka Meathead, should stick to bad movies. No one cares what this dummy thinks." 3 million views. Hundreds of thousands of retweets. And the name Meathead was suddenly trending again. Rob Reiner hadn't heard that nickname in years. It was from his All in the Family days. A joke from a character. But Trump weaponized it. And from that moment on, he never stopped using it. Act 2. From nickname to nightmare. Trump began invoking Rob Reiner at rallies. Not Hollywood. Not Democrats. Not even the elites. Rob Reiner. You know who hates America? Rob Reiner. Total loser. Screams about me all day. Look at him. Meathead never grew up. Hollywood's so full of hate. Just ask Rob Reiner. Meathead wants open borders and closed minds. Sad. Over and over. And each time he said it, his followers laughed. But for Rob, it wasn't funny. It was harassment. It was fear. Because after each Trump comment, Rob's inbox exploded. Death threats. Hate mail. Messages like, Meathead should be put down. And, you're next. Romy saw it all. She read the emails. Watched her father cry after a particularly vicious night on social media. Watched him ask, not once, but twice, should I delete my accounts? He didn't. But something inside him changed. He stopped smiling as much. He stopped attending public events. And most heartbreakingly, he stopped directing. Romy later said, Trump didn't just insult my dad. He killed something in him. Act 3. The phone call that crossed the line. Here's what few people know. In 2019, Rob received a direct phone call from a blocked number. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Trump. According to Romy, who listened to the voicemail left when Rob didn't pick up, the former president said, "We should debate, Rob. You and me. One-on-one. Let America decide who the real Meathead is." It sounded like a dare. A taunt. But Rob didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. He deleted the message. But Romy saved a copy. For evidence. For memories. For revenge. Act 4. The obsession becomes public. When Trump lost the 2020 election, Rob tweeted, "America just dumped the biggest meathead of them all." Trump didn't forget. Even out of office, he kept the feud alive. He mentioned Rob in speeches in Texas, Florida, and Iowa. At one point, he referred to Rob Reiner as that lunatic director who thinks yelling on MSNBC is activism. It never stopped. And while some people assumed it was theater, Romy knew better. Because Trump didn't mention Spielberg, didn't mention Oliver Stone, didn't mention Aaron Sorkin, he zeroed in on Rob. And when Romy dug through public records, she found something chilling. In 2021, a PAC connected to Trump's campaign bought ad space on YouTube with search keywords including Rob Reiner rant, meathead meltdown, Rob Reiner Trump feud. They were using her father's name to raise money. That was the moment Romy realized. This wasn't politics. It was obsession. Act V, the funeral leak. So when Rob was murdered in 2025, when the headlines broke, when the public wept, Donald Trump did not issue a statement. He retweeted an old clip of Rob yelling on CNN and captioned it, "One last rant from Meathead." What a career. It was beyond cruel. It was deliberately vile. And then came the RSVP. A leaked list showed a Trump representative had requested attendance for a private farewell. Romy froze. She told her lawyer, "If that man or anyone representing him comes within 10 feet of my family, I want them removed. I want them arrested." She wasn't bluffing. She called LAPD, filed a trespass warning, filed for a restraining order against any Trump campaign affiliate attending in symbolic representation. The chapel increased security because Romy was scared, not just of a media circus, but of something worse, of Trump using her father's death as a stage. Act 6, the morning of the funeral. 8:46 a.m. A black SUV pulls up across the street. Tinted windows. Unmarked plates. Security watches. Tensions rise. Romy is inside the chapel, shaking. An officer approaches the car. It leaves without a word. Was it Trump? Probably not. But Romy never forgot that moment. The silence. The waiting. The not knowing. Because with Trump, you never knew. And she wasn't going to give him a single second of her grief. Act 7, the letter. 3 days after the funeral, Romy received a manila envelope. Typed. No return address. Just a printed sheet of paper. The message? "I heard the door was locked. Don't worry. I wouldn't waste time on weak directors. But history will remember who the real meathead was." 45-inch. Romy burned the letter, but the image never left her. The final insult. Trump's AI deepfake. 1 week after Rob's funeral, an AI-generated video appeared online. It showed Rob Reiner delivering a fake monologue, praising Trump. The mouth was manipulated. The voice cloned. The message fabricated. It trended. Trump's PAC claimed no involvement. But Romy knew. She filed a cease and desist. Filed a lawsuit. She made it her mission to protect her father's memory, even after death. And that meant one thing. Trump would never touch his legacy again. Not even with a speech. Not even with flowers. Not even with a silent seat in the last row. He was banned. Permanently. From the funeral. From the wake. From the conversation. From everything. Because some wounds are personal. Some fights are eternal. And some names don't belong in the same room as the people they tried to destroy. But even after all this, even after Clint, Billy, Mel, and Trump, there was still one more betrayal. Because someone inside the Reiner family, someone close to Romy, leaked the guest list. And when she found out who, everything shattered. Every family has secrets. But some secrets aren't just painful, they're strategic. Used like weapons. Pulled out at just the right moment. To wound. To control. To expose. And for Romy Reiner, that moment came 2 days before her father's funeral. She thought she'd seen the worst already. The murders. The media frenzy. The blacklisted icons. The threat of Trump showing up uninvited. But then came the leak. An anonymous email. Sent to TMZ. Subject line. Rob Reiner's banned list. Confirmed. Attached. A scanned document. Typed. Clear. Brutal. For names. All caps. Underlined. Clint Eastwood. Billy Crystal. Mel Brooks. Donald Trump. And at the bottom? as per Romy Reiner's explicit orders. The press ran with it instantly. Headlines exploded. Romy's funeral fury. Hollywood icons barred from Reiner burial. Inside the list, why Romy Reiner banned her father's friends. From meathead to meltdown, Reiner family implodes. But for Romy, the public shame wasn't the worst part. It was the breach of trust, because only 5 people had seen that guest list. Her lawyer, the funeral director, the chapel coordinator, a private family friend helping with security, and her cousin, Ellie, the cousin who knew too much. Ellie Reiner was more than a cousin. She was Romy's childhood best friend. They grew up like sisters, shared summer vacations, secret handshakes, sleepovers in Brentwood with Carl Reiner reading them bedtime stories. They were family, but more importantly, they were allies. Or so Romy thought. But Ellie had changed. After getting rejected from several film schools, Ellie pivoted into journalism. Not just any journalism. Celebrity gossip. Tabloid-level reporting. Under a pen name, of course. Romy didn't think much of it until she saw the byline. By Eleanor G., the same name attached to the first story that leaked the banned guest list. Romy confronted her immediately. The call was short, sharp, recorded. Romy, did you send the list? Ellie, I sent a list. Not the final one. And I didn't think they'd run it. Romy, you leaked our pain for clicks? Ellie, no. I leaked the truth. People deserve to know how far you're going. Click. Just like that, a lifetime of trust ended. And Romy didn't cry. She screamed. The war within. Romy wasn't just fighting the outside world anymore. Now the betrayal had crept in. Her cousin. Her confidant. Someone who knew how fragile she was feeling and twisted the knife anyway. It wasn't about journalism. It was jealousy. Ellie had always felt overshadowed by Rob's fame. She said it quietly, joked about it in passing. But now she had a way to flip the power, to make Romy the villain. And she succeeded. Within hours, the narrative shifted. Instead of Rob's funeral being about grief and legacy, it was about Romy. The headlines kept piling up. Romy's revenge. How grief turned to vengeance. Funeral fallout. Why the Reiner family is divided. Is Romy Reiner exploiting her father's death? She couldn't believe it. Not after everything she'd endured. And still, no one came to her defense. No statement from Mel. No comment from Billy. No rebuttal from Clint. Because they were glad. Glad to see her take the fall. Glad to paint her as hysterical, erratic, emotional. Glad to avoid responsibility for how they'd treated her father. The decision to go public. Romy didn't want the spotlight, but she was cornered. So she made a decision that stunned the media. She would deliver a live eulogy on camera. No script. No PR firm. No prepared remarks. Just her. And her truth. The networks offered slots. Streaming services offered exclusives. She declined them all. Instead, she told the funeral chapel to broadcast it on one Instagram Live. One angle. No filters. Just raw emotion. The eulogy. It was 11:13 a.m. Sunlight filtered through stained glass. The air was tense. Romy walked to the podium, held a folded paper, though she never looked at it. And then she began. I'm Romy Reiner. I'm not here to play nice. I'm not here to pretend my father's funeral has been peaceful. Because the truth is, it's been hell. She paused. Hell, not because of grief. Not because of murder. But because of the people who showed up too late. Or tried to show up at all. Another pause. My father spent the last decade of his life being ridiculed. By people who called him friends. By people who called him meathead. By people who couldn't stand that he still had a spine. The silence was absolute. Clint, Billy, Mel, Trump. They weren't banned from this funeral out of pettiness. They were banned because they had already buried him in life. Gasp. A single person in the back sobbed. This was supposed to be sacred. But someone leaked our private pain. Turned a memorial into a circus. And that someone was family. She didn't say Ellie's name. But she didn't have to. So this is the last time I speak on this. The next time you say my father's name, say it with respect. Because if you ever call him meathead again, I'll make sure you never forget what happens when a daughter stands up to a world that tried to silence her father. And then, she walked off stage. No bow. No tears. Just fire. Aftermath. The clip went viral. 18 million views in 24 hours. Hashtags flooded Twitter. Hashtag Romy Reiner was right. Hashtag Meathead was a lion. Hashtag Justice for Rob. Even her critics paused. Even Billy Crystal quietly liked the post. Even Mel Brooks allegedly sent a text. "She's got your fire, Rob. God help us." Trump didn't say a word. For once. Ellie's response. 2 days later, Ellie posted a Medium article titled, "Why I Leaked the Funeral List and Why I'd Do It Again." It bombed. Comments ripped her apart. She deleted her social media. No one stood by her. Because in the court of public opinion, Romy Reiner had won. Not through PR, not through politics, but through grief turned into action. A new Rob Reiner. That night, Romy posted something no one expected. A teaser trailer. It was called The Meathead Diaries. A docuseries. 6 episodes. Featuring unseen footage, private letters, deleted interviews, a full re-examination of her father's legacy. She had a message in the caption. "You tried to define him. You tried to mock him. You tried to silence me. Now I'm telling his story." And people were ready. Because while the funeral was over, the reckoning had just begun. And Romy Reiner? She was just getting started. But the next battle wouldn't be about guests. It would be about the dead man's will. And what Rob left behind would rip the remaining Reiner family in half. Every powerful family has a moment where everything breaks. Not because of what was done in public, but because of what was hidden, because of what was buried. In safes, in drawers, in documents locked away, meant to be read only when it was too late to argue. For the Reiners, that moment came the morning after the funeral. It started quietly. Romy was still in her pajamas, sorting through condolence cards, when her phone buzzed. Private number. No caller ID. Voicemail left. She pressed play. A raspy, disguised voice crackled through the speaker. "You should check the second drawer of the desk in the upstairs study. The safe code is 061948. He didn't want Nick to have it. And you need to see what he wrote. Before the lawyers do." Click. No name. No follow-up. Just silence. And that code. Romy's hand trembled. She recognized the digits. Her father's birthday, June 19th, 1948. Whoever sent that message knew him, knew where he kept things, knew what was inside, and more importantly, knew what she didn't. She dropped everything and drove straight to the Brentwood house. The murder scene had been released by police the day before. It was quiet now, empty, except for shadows. The smell of old roses lingered in the foyer. Some flowers had wilted on the stairwell. But upstairs, in the study, everything was exactly how Rob had left it. The desk, the safe, the envelope, the second drawer, right side, slightly jammed. She tugged. It slid open. Inside, a locked steel safe. No label, no instructions, just a keypad. She entered the code, 061948. Click. Unlocked. Inside, one envelope, one USB stick, one leather-bound notebook, a sealed plastic bag with what looked like a photograph. She pulled out the envelope first. "To my daughter, only if I'm gone." Her throat tightened. She opened it. The letter inside was handwritten. Rob's unmistakable script. Bold, slanted, emotional. "Romy, if you're reading this, I guess things didn't go the way I hoped. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay. It hasn't been for a while. You've seen how the people I once called friends turned their backs on me. You've seen what your brothers become. And you've seen me, trying to hold everything together. But this family's falling apart. And I know it's only going to get worse after I'm gone. So here's what I've done." She paused, hands trembling. He continued. "I rewrote the will. Nick doesn't get the house. He doesn't get the rights to the documentaries. He doesn't get my notes. You do." Her heart dropped. "Everything that matters, every unfinished script, every tape, every piece of work I didn't get to finish, I'm leaving it to you. You're the only one who protected my voice. And I know it's going to cause a war, but I need you to be strong. Because the world won't remember what I said, only what they were allowed to hear. Don't let them rewrite me. Love you always. Dad." Romy sat in silence. For 20 minutes. No tears. No screams. Just weight. The weight of legacy, responsibility, and a truth that would shatter everything. The USB drive. She plugged it into her laptop the moment she got home. It contained one folder. Unheard. Inside, a 45-minute audio file. A scanned document labeled, Amendment, Reiner Will. A video file titled, For Romy. Only her. She clicked on the audio file first. It was her father, Rob Reiner. Tired. Raspy. Speaking into what sounded like a handheld recorder. "This is for the record. In case things get out of control. He paused. If this audio is being used legally, then it means I've been murdered, or I've died under circumstances that are questionable. Either way, I need it known. I changed my will on October 9th. Nick Reiner is not to inherit a single creative asset. Romy's blood ran cold. This file, it was dated 5 days before the murder. He knew something. Nick's gotten worse. He stopped taking his meds. He's angry all the time. He thinks I owe him the name, the legacy, but he doesn't want the work, just the credit. Silence. Then, if anything happens to me, and Nick's involved, use this. The war begins. Romy sent everything to the estate lawyer. 2 hours later, she got a call. Romy, this changes everything. Rob's original will left Nick 40% of the estate, including the guest house, certain IP rights, and a portion of the royalties from his films. But the amendment? Stripped it all. And worse for Nick, the amendment was filed, but never disclosed to his legal team, which meant Nick didn't know, and once he found out, all hell would break loose. Back to the tipster. Who sent that voicemail? Who knew about the safe? The code? Romy had no idea. She tried tracing the call. No luck. Burner number. She asked the housekeeper, the security guard, even Ellie. Everyone denied it. But deep down, Romy had a theory. It was someone close. Someone who loved her father, but was scared of going public. Maybe an old friend. An assistant. Maybe even someone on Nick's legal team with a conscience. Whoever it was, they just saved Rob's legacy. Because without that tip, Nick would have inherited the house, the rights, the narrative, and Rob would have been erased by the very person who, according to his own words, terrified him. The photo. Romy finally opened the last item, the plastic bag. Inside, a photo of Rob, Nick, and a third man. The date, 2022. Everyone was smiling. But on the back, Rob had written something chilling. The day I realized I didn't know my son anymore. No further explanation, just a snapshot of a broken bond and a father who was watching the walls close in. The media doesn't know yet, but they will. Romy hasn't released the audio. Not yet, but she's preparing to. Because the truth? This wasn't just a private shift. It was a public detonation waiting to go off. The amendment would be filed. The will would go to court. And Nick Reiner would soon find out that he'd been completely cut out. Not by accident, not by oversight, but by choice, by his own father. And when he found out, Romy knew what would happen. Nick would retaliate. He always did. And what came next?